Unknown Thought is made possible through the generosity of sponsors who care about people. IC Savings Bank, Ready Honda, and Corey's Clothiers. My guest today is Malcolm Lester, illustrious publisher and generally fascinating man. Malcolm, I have a few questions for you today, and hopefully we can have a good discussion. I want to ask you about being Jewish, Canadian, and male, and how your life has positioned those three words.
Well, I started in publishing after I left rabbinical school, interestingly enough. I was studying to be a Reform rabbi at Hebrew Union College in the early 60s. And I decided in my third year that this wasn't for me. The short reason was I decided it wasn't a profession for a Jewish boy. The real reason is because I started to have serious religious doubts, and I felt I couldn't honestly continue. So when I came back to Toronto, I got quite sick. I think I was having some sort of collapse. I was diagnosed with mononucleosis. And while I was recovering, I was thinking, what do I want to do with my life? This was in the fall of 1964.
Monotheistic nucleosis?
Could be. Yeah. Thinking what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought that publishing is a business that attracted me because it combined ideas, and I was always interested and still am interested in ideas, with business, with entrepreneurship, with making a living. So what I did was, I knew nothing about book publishing. I canvassed a number of publishers, and one had an opening for a mathematics editor. So I went down for an interview and was hired. I didn't have a CV. I didn't know what a CV or resume was, but in those days, you didn't have to. I met the editor-in-chief and the president, and I was hired. That's how I started in publishing.
So how did you become such a proud and cultural Canadian? You called yourself, as part of the publishing world, a cultural entrepreneur. And how did you balance Jewish and Canadian at that point?
Well, one of the areas, as a publisher, you're looking for areas to publish in that haven't been too widely tapped. And one area that I felt was not widely developed in Canadian book publishing was the area was the story of the Jewish community of Canada, how it got to be what it was, how it grew, how it developed, where it came from. So by hook or by crook, we decided to publish a number of books on the Jewish Canadian experience, and that's how I got involved in publishing on Jewish themes.
So the Literary Review of Canada called a book that you published one of the most important Canadian books of the 20th century, and that is the Irving Abella Harold Troper, None is Too Many. And for a generation that read that book and had our eyes open, that was considered a seminal reading. It changed everything, essentially. And I'm wondering, what was it like to open the sardine can of history?
It felt very important. It felt very like we were doing something that had never been done before. We were showing, in effect, the dark side of Canadian history. We tended to think of Canada as a very open country to Jewish immigration. And what None is Too Many showed that in the 30s it was closed to Jewish immigration. In fact, people in the Department of Immigration were anti-Semitic. And that's where the phrase None is Too Many came from. An official in the immigration department was asked, how many Jews should we let into Canada who were fleeing Hitler? None is too many.
And do you feel that things have really changed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think Canada is much more, profoundly more open to immigrants. In fact, our book had a lot to do with the way our country accepted Vietnamese boat people. The then Minister of Immigration said publicly he didn't want to be remembered as the people in the immigration department are now, as not allowing people fleeing a country into Canada.
And do you feel that immigrants, and I know you published a book on this subject, do you feel that immigrants can truly integrate into Canadian society?
Absolutely. And I think they can remain truthful to their core beliefs, but they have to integrate into Canadian society and look at the way the Jews integrated.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about the Jews integrating. I actually question whether a Jew, a practicing Jew, and even a non-practicing Jew can fully integrate into another society. Is it possible? Is there not enough about Judaism that is designed to create apartness and separateness that will not interfere with integrating, particularly into society like Canada, which is a sort of a mosaic where you have to give up to become in some ways while retaining? A Jew already retains a lot and doesn't want to give up so easily. Can we truly integrate into this society?
I think if you have modern beliefs as a Jew, if you believe your Judaism did not end in 17th century Poland, for example, you can integrate. I think if you believe that your Judaism should be congruent with the kind of Judaism that was practiced 300 years ago, then it's difficult to integrate. And you create enclaves within the broader Canadian community.
So I will go back to this question of, modern Judaism versus, sort of the development of Judaism to be closed-minded. But I wanted to ask you, where do you establish your starting point for Judaism that allows you to link modern back with traditional? Where is that traditional point?
I don't know if I have a particular point in history, but I believe Judaism has always been a religion that has developed and is a kind of an ongoing process. I grew up as a Reformed Jew, and I think a better term might be reformative Judaism rather than a Reformed Judaism, because it's always rethinking itself.
It's interesting because I'm a very big believer in renormative Judaism. I like to bring it back to normal. That's my approach.
And what is normal?
It's subjective, admittedly. But I like the idea that a Jew can integrate fully into society if they are willing to do so. I like the fact that, a lot of changes have happened, and we're very proud of what Canada has done in terms of their immigration policy. My question for you actually is from a different perspective now. Would a book today published on a similar subject or similar fashion of, so to speak, opening that can of history, would it have the same impact? Has book publishing changed? Is media changed? Is it still possible for a piece of paper to have an impact?
I like to think so. Obviously, there are all sorts of other media that give out information in a much more quicker way than a book does. But I think for the depth of analysis, you still can't beat a book. So I would answer your question, hopefully yes.
Who's going to read the books if we live in a society that's interested in weblogs and news that's generated to match the needs of what people are looking to read? And are there enough people that are going to read books? Do you believe young people are interested in physically reading or even on their Kindle, but is there a process of reading that is still going to be maintained and be?
I think there is a process of reading. I'm not sure the process will be embodied in the physical form we now call a book. I think we're going to see more and more people reading e-books on their e-book reader, their Kindle, their Kobo, whatever. So that's reading text. It's not reading books. Books as a physical object. And the purchase of these objects will decline, I think. Or is declining.
I'm always interested. What do you, in a few seconds, tell me, what do you read?
Right now, I'm reading a lot of biographies. I just read a great biography of Arthur Koestler, a man that I admire tremendously. I just read a little memoir by Paul Quarrington, a Canadian writer that I knew who died very suddenly of cancer this past year. Yeah. I just read a collection of short stories by a man named Joseph Epstein, an essayist and short story writer that I also like very much.
Malcolm, thank you very much for being here today. It's a pleasure to get to know you a little better and probe deeper into the mind of someone who's had a profound influence on Canadian and Jewish society. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.